Our planet is changing in ways that will have profound impacts on all of humankind. I'm here to say we need to act.
On a hot day last summer, the president laid out a new, more aggressive plan to rein in climate change.
These are facts.
Obama claimed to see a path forward from the dirty energy of the past to the clean energy of the future. But the energy source the president talked about the most wasn't wind or solar or even nuclear. It was natural gas.
We're also producing more cleaner burning natural gas than any other country on Earth.
He called it clean, affordable, and critical to stopping global warming.
It can also help reduce our carbon emissions.
These days, a lot of people are saying that natural gas is the solution to both our energy and climate woes. But I discovered that a handful of scientists have some problems with that claim, including one who used to work for the gas industry.
The industry really wants the American people to believe. They really want the President of the United States to believe. They want all the state regulators and state legislators to believe what they're saying, which is shale gas is our savior. Merry Christmas, America. It's going to make us energy independent, energy secure. It's going to keep prices low. It's going to kill coal. Well, all those things depend upon shale gas being clean. And we questioned that.
Got to keep an eye out for golfers. Hopefully they're sending them off the other way. Don't want to get hit in the back of the head.
It would take a very weird shot for us to get hit in the back of the head.
I'm a columnist for the New York Times, and I write a lot about climate change. In the last few years, there's been growing excitement about natural gas as a clean alternative to coal and oil. And in cities like Fort Lupton, there's another reason to be excited. All the money that's flowing.
This is an oil and gas operations area. It's within 400 feet, 300 feet of residential homes on the golf course.
No complaints, no problems. This is the way it is, and people are okay with that.
If there were any complaints, I can guarantee you that they'd be calling the mayor. So I would be able to,
I guess
I'd be
you'd
here
know
that.
about
Yeah.
it.
When I first got elected, we were having foreclosures left and right, just like it was across the country.
2008, 2009.
Yeah. And when I got in, the oil and gas came. And when that came, we started adding jobs. And so it made a huge difference. I mean, everybody's up at least 20% in their business, 20 to 30%. We're the Saudi Arabia of natural gas.
Just a few years ago, America's energy future looked uncertain. Then fracking came along. It's an intensive process where millions of gallons of water and chemicals are injected underground to break up the rock and free countless tiny pockets of natural gas. For the first time, fracking made it possible to extract the gas from a type of rock called shale. Around the same time, massive new shale formations were discovered. Suddenly, America had a new domestic energy source, worth more than $10 trillion. Soon, we are fracking at an almost inconceivable rate, drilling more than 35,000 new wells a year. I've heard lots of complaints about fracking: water catching on fire, toxic chemicals, even earthquakes. But to me, it seemed like maybe the pros outweighed the cons. Natural gas, I learned, produces just half as much carbon dioxide as coal. And when it comes to climate change, that's a big difference. But not far from the natural gas fields of Fort Lupton, a scientist was making a surprising discovery that would challenge the conventional wisdom about natural gas.
We started doing measurements in the Denver Basin, north of Denver, in 2008. We had equipped a tower with instruments to measure methane, carbon dioxide, and a few other gases. And we noticed interesting readings. We had a signal there we had never seen before.
Dramatic.
Yeah, very. First a
In
spike.
2008, Gabby Petrone, a top government scientist at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, couldn't believe what she was seeing. High levels of methane, a greenhouse gas up to 80 times more powerful than carbon dioxide.
Enhanced methane, propane, butane, almost in every sample. Methane is a strong greenhouse gas. And I had never seen these kind of measurements. So we're like, okay, let's try to understand better what this tower is telling us. And we started driving around.
Petrone needed to find out where the methane was coming from, so she turned this old van into a high-tech mobile methane detector. Soon, she was crisscrossing vast stretches of northeastern Colorado, taking thousands of measurements.
Clear? So we're taking.
She thought the methane might be coming from landfills or the 2.6 million cows in the area. But the source turned out to be something she didn't expect.
Methane is right there. But look at these levels. There's no questioning where the methane is coming from.
It's natural gas, okay.
Definitely. We saw a lot of emitters in these oil and gas fields. Every well pad had some kind of signature.
What she was finding was alarming, but was enough methane leaking to make it a serious problem? To find out, she needed more data. Around the same time that Gabby Petrone was driving her van across Colorado, another scientist at Cornell University in New York was starting an investigation of his own.
Of course, we want to make sure that we're accounting for all the methane that might be flowing into the volume over that area.
Tony Ingraffia is a professor of structural engineering and an expert in rock fracture mechanics. He spent many years consulting for the oil and gas industry, but now he's one of the industry's biggest critics. It all started a few years ago when he decided to take a closer look at what happens to natural gas when it leaks into the air.
Natural gas is essentially methane, CH4, the simplest of all of the hydrocarbons. It's colorless, it's odorless, it's tasteless. Methane, when it's burned, produces less carbon dioxide per unit of energy produced than coal or oil.
It's less dirty.
Less dirty than coal or oil, by far. No question about that. But the problem with methane is that if it gets into the atmosphere without being burned, it becomes a very potent greenhouse gas, worse than carbon dioxide, by far.
How many times worse?
Ask this question. I put a pound of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, I put a pound of methane into the atmosphere. If you wait 20 years, methane is anywhere from 72 and 105 times more potent than carbon dioxide.
Wow.
So you'd have to leak 80 pounds of carbon dioxide to do the same harm as 1 pound of methane.
It makes for a thicker blanket than an equivalent amount of carbon dioxide.
Makes the Earth's atmosphere a better greenhouse. Therefore, we have to make sure we don't leak very much methane.
Any leaks make natural gas less clean than advertised. And the more it leaks, the dirtier it gets. The question is, how much methane can leak before natural gas starts to get as bad as coal, the dirtiest fossil fuel? Most experts say the threshold is about 3%. As long as no more than 3% of the natural gas we produce ends up leaking into the atmosphere, it's not necessarily good, but it's still better than coal. Ingraffia and his team wanted to collect all the data they could get their hands on to estimate just how much methane was leaking across the entire country.
And over a period of 2 years, we gathered the information we could from the EPA, from the Department of Energy, from industry sources. We pick up the phone and call people at gas companies and oil companies and ask them. And in most cases, they were quite willing to say, yeah, here's the information, here's the data.
No one had pieced all this together before, and what they found looked like very bad news.
We published our paper and we said, look, we concluded that as an upper bound, 7.9% of all the gas produced by a shale gas well during its lifetime would not get burned, but would get emitted. At the lower end, we said about 3.6%. That's the range. It could be this much. But even if it's only this much, natural gas is not any better than coal or oil. And if it's this much, it's way worse.
Even at the low end of the range, the news was bad.
Yes. But I emphasize, we weren't going out and measuring anything. We don't have the resources to do that.
You were really guessing at the amount of methane that was leaking. You really didn't know at that time.
We really didn't know, but I object to the word guess. We were using best available scientific estimation methods to estimate, but we didn't know. We don't know now. No one knows.
Even so, the natural gas industry maintains that the leak rate is only about 1%, and they didn't take kindly to Ingrafia's results. I'm on my way to meet with Mark Bowling, a top executive with Southwestern Energy, the 5th largest natural gas producer in the nation. I want to ask him about Dr. Ingrafia's paper, which estimated that more than 3% of all the natural gas produced in the U.S. is leaking.
We are not going to let those profits go up in the air. So that's part. I'm not sure whether that's the real answer to your question, but it's from our perspective, from industry's perspective. We said, well, of course it can't be that high. We'd be fired if we allowed our leak rate to be that high.
It's obviously a touchy subject, because he's the only industry official who would agree to talk on camera. And he wants to show me how preventing leaks is just smart business.
That's where we capture all of the gas from the minute that it comes back from a hydraulic fracturing flowback and put it right into the sales line.
Several years ago, Southwestern started doing what it called green completions to capture gases, including methane, that would otherwise escape into the air.
The old way we used to do it, like this. We would vent probably 16 million cubic feet of gas on average from each well that we are now capturing. Multiply that by the amount of money you make per 1,000 cubic feet, it pays for itself.
So you're making money on it because you're selling the 16 million cubic feet that you're capturing from
Absolutely.
Air combined with fresh snow, and you kind of had the...
Bowling says Ingrafia's research just focused on the dirtiest wells.
When I looked at some of the assumptions they used to come up with their numbers, then I go, oh, well, the study lost credibility with me in that regard. And the kind of work that was put into it wasn't what it should be, to come out and make those statements like, hey, natural gas is dirtier than coal. That just didn't seem right to me.
After talking to Bowling, I try to find out how many other companies are actually doing green completions. No one seems to know, not even the government. Nevertheless, when it comes to methane leaks, the government more or less agrees with the industry estimates. The Environmental Protection Agency says the leak rate is just 1.5%, well below the 3% threshold. I wanted to find out how they get that number, but for some reason the EPA declined to talk to me on camera. But then I found a former EPA official who was willing to talk, and he explained how the agency comes up with its estimates, which are officially called emission inventories.
I've worked 38 years with EPA and actually formulated the techniques for developing emission inventories. I was responsible for them right from the start. They're of necessity guesses.
That's because the EPA doesn't do comprehensive measurements. As crazy as it sounds, when the EPA says methane emissions are going down in the U.S., they're pretty much taking the gas industry's word for it.
All these emission inventories, by the way, are derived from industry-supported data.
So when EPA publishes estimates of methane, of leaks of methane, that data is coming from industry.
Right.
Is it all independently verified?
No. You know, Mark, in my experience, developing and maintaining emission inventories nationally for many years, every time we looked further, we found more emissions. And every time there was some sort of large growth in a particular industry, there were unforeseen emissions. And we're in the same situation today, certainly with the gas drilling that's going on now. The extensiveness of it is unbelievable.
But EPA's recently lowered their estimate of methane leak rate.
Well, where did the data come from? The data came from the industry.
Right.
Now, that's like Farmer John sends the fox out to say, how many chickens do I have? And he comes back and says, you got 10 less chickens this year than you had last year.
Yes.
It seemed like everyone was guessing about methane leaks. But in Colorado, Gabby Patron's research was finally yielding some concrete results. After more than 2 years driving around collecting samples, Gabby Patron had a wealth of data showing leaks throughout the entire natural gas system in the Denver Basin.
What'd you do with that information? Where did that go?
We wrote a paper and we estimated at the time that on average 4% of the gas that was extracted from the ground ended up in the atmosphere instead of in the pipeline.
You're showing a leak rate that's much, much higher than EPA estimates and much 4 times as high, a minimum of 4 times as high as what the industry says there is.
That's right.
I mean, this is real information produced by scientists using real instruments.
And peer-reviewed.
Peer-reviewed, impartial, etc. You present this information to the industry and they say what?
They have a lot of questions. I don't think that everybody's happy with what we found.
Here was an independent study produced by top government scientists suggesting that, at least in the Denver Basin, natural gas is far from clean. Not surprisingly, the industry argued that Patron's results were just an outlier, a single snapshot of a vast natural gas system.
That's where we're going. It's making measurements every 1 second.
Practically, as soon as we started to leave Vernal, it went up.
Yeah, it's starting to go up.
The Uinta Basin in eastern Utah is home to thousands of natural gas and oil wells, and not much else. I'm here with a team from Picaro, a company that's working on cutting-edge technology for measuring methane emissions. Normally, these guys are hired by the gas companies themselves to find and fix leaks. This time, though, they're heading out on their own dime. They want to know if the methane problem could possibly be as bad as Patron's numbers suggest. And to find out, they brought the big guns, equipment that's 1,000 times more sensitive than what most companies use to detect methane.
The blue dots are natural gas wells?
Yes, or natural gas facilities of one type or another.
It's insane. We're driving down this road, and we took that right turn, and then within minutes, at first it doubled, now it's
sitting at triple
isn't
it. Yeah, that's correct.
It takes 2 weeks to fully cover the area. They find leaks everywhere. There's so much gas in the air that methane readings are sky high over the entire 700 square mile basin. I was surprised by what Gabby Patron showed me in Colorado. It's starting to look like Utah is even worse.
When we got to Utah, I was shocked. I have never, and I have done measurements all over the world. I have never seen a situation ever over hundreds of square miles. The number of leaks in Uinta is staggering.
A few weeks after our trip to Utah, Eric Crossan from Picaro is analyzing the data we collected. What he's finding is hard to fathom.
We did a back-of-the-envelope calculation and came to the conclusion that the leak rate coming out of the Uinta Basin was about 11%.
Utah, in other words, is even worse than Colorado. And on the heels of Picaro's findings, another group of NOAA scientists looks at methane emissions coming from a mixture of oil and gas wells in the Los Angeles basin. Their number? 17%.
We hear industry say, there's just not that much in the way of leaks. Maybe we're losing 1%. It's not that high. It's not that big a problem. What do you say to that?
They're wrong. They're just flat out wrong in terms of what these emissions are. The EPA is flat out wrong as well. But it's like so many other inaccuracies in life. If you repeat them often enough, and if you repeat them loud enough, and you defend them vociferously, then that kind of becomes accepted as truth.
Los Angeles Basin, up to 17%. Now, granted, that's one basin. Utah was another basin. Colorado was another basin. But these basins are starting to line up. All the data comes out so far. Doesn't bode well for the final answer, looking like it's way low, like the industry says, oh, less than 1%. Impossible. Absolutely impossible.
NOAA measured, got levels of 17% in the Los Angeles basin. You know, it takes a lot of 1% emissions to bring that average back down.
I can tell you that I looked at the studies that NOAA did, and I know something about the Picaro instrumentation. And I think some of those numbers, they certainly concern me. How could you say that methane emission rate was 1.5%? Very, very difficult to get there from here for that.
After what I've seen and working on this story for months, a 1% leak rate industry-wide, countrywide, that really seems laughable.
No question there's work to be done, but we can all waste our time about, is it 4%, is it 8%, is it 1%, or we can all just say, I don't care what anyone thinks it is, let's go out and fix the problem.
It's nice to hear someone from the industry at least acknowledge there's a problem. President Obama has acknowledged it too and promised to study it. And in Colorado, the Environmental Defense Fund successfully campaigned for tougher regulations on methane leaks. But actually fixing the problem might not be that easy. Some say technology like the kind I saw at Mark Bowling's facility is the answer. And a study last year by the Environmental Defense Fund showed that these so-called green completions can help quite a bit. But in Colorado, where more and more wells are doing green completions, Gabby Petrone still hasn't seen methane emissions go down. Then I started thinking about all the places across the country where gas can leak. Not just the hundreds of thousands of wells, but a pipeline system 1.5 million miles long, with tens of thousands of compressor stations, countless valves, and corroded pipes running under towns and cities everywhere. Even under the very city where the future of natural gas will be decided.
Check these first.
This one, we can smell it.
Yeah, you can smell it just walking up. Oh, yeah.
I think it's saturating my instrument.
11%. That's a dangerous concentration.
Yeah,
if that sparked, that would blow up.
Rob Jackson is a scientist with Duke University. He's been using Picaro technology to find methane leaks in cities. He just finished a study in Boston where he found thousands of them. And now he's finding the same thing here.
This is a partial map of the city. The red is all the road miles in the city. The yellow are the leaks. And you literally have thousands of very small leaks spread out all across the city. It's death by 1,000 cuts. So that's 45% gas. That's almost pure methane coming out of the ground. There's so much methane there that you actually couldn't light that because there's not enough oxygen. Not that that's much consolation.
There's a lot more we still don't know. But from everything I've seen, it seems like right now natural gas could be making our climate problem worse rather than better. I think we need to ask ourselves if that's a risk worth taking, because the natural gas boom in this country is just getting started.